हरि ओम. ओम श्री चिन्मय सद्गुरवे नमः. Hari Om. Reading of the book Mundakopanishad with the commentary by Param Poojya Gurudev, Swami Chinmayananda ji of Chinmaya Mission. Overview. Mundak removes the superimposed veil of ignorance, obscuring the Atma through direct and penetrating exposition of the higher knowledge, like a razor removes the hair from the head. This Upanishad contains most famous, oft-quoted analogies in language, which is picturesque, couched in charming meter and diction. As the spider projects and withdraws unto itself the web, as the herbs and plants sprout out from the earth, as hairs grow on the head and body of man, so from the imperishable being comes out the universe. Mundakopanishad Mantra, Chapter 1, Section 1, Mantra number 7. The Pranava is the bow, the Atman is the arrow, and the Brahman is said to be its mark goal. It should be hit by one who is self-collected, and like the arrow, becomes one with the mark, that is Brahman. It is said in chapter 2, section 2, mantra number 4. Two birds bound to each other, in close friendship, perch on the same tree. One of them eats the fruits of the tree with relish, while the other just looks on without eating. Said in chapter 3, section 1, mantra 1. Gurudev's commentary on the Upanishad, like all other Upanishads, gives insights to the seeker to understand the subtle language of the Upanishads in an easy and clear manner. The master strokes are very evident in his lucid lectures on the Upanishads. Mundakopanishad contains preface, introduction, peace invocation. Chapter 1, section 1, lineage of teachers. Shaunak's question after approaching the teacher, Angira. Answer by Angira. Knowledge is of two types. Nature of higher and lower knowledge. Explanation about the higher knowledge. Imperishable Brahman, cause of the universe. Sequence of creation of the universe. And summary. Chapter 1, section 2, a look at the rituals. Description of the Agnihotra sacrifice, harmful results of rituals performed wrongly, 7 tongues of fire, attainment of heaven by performing Agnihotra ritual properly, criticism of rituals devoid of knowledge, Upasana, description of the sad state of knowledgeless, devoid of Upasana, ritualists. What men with knowledge, Upasana, attain. A seeker seeking meaninglessness of the worldly and heavenly pleasures advised to approach a teacher and seek supreme knowledge. Instructions to teachers on initiating fit students. Chapter 2, Section 1. Birth of all beings from Brahman, like sparks from fire. The absolute nature of Brahman. Brahman, the supreme cause of all. Cosmic form of Brahman, the indweller of all living beings. Sequence of creation from the imperishable. Rituals and means to perform them are also born from the imperishable. Objects, organs, and their presiding deities are also the creation of Brahman. Mountains, rivers, plants are all also born of Brahman. Brahman and the universe are one. Knowing Brahman destroys the knots of ignorance. Chapter 2, Section 2. Pointers to the nature of Brahman and advice how to know it. Instructions on contemplation upon Brahman. Methods of penetrating Brahman. The analogy of penetration. Method of self-realization. Method of contemplation on Brahman with the help of Pranav. Om. Description of lower Brahman and mode of contemplating upon it. Fruits of realization of Brahman. Self-effulgent Brahman. All illumining nature of Brahman. All pervasiveness of Brahman. Chapter 3, Section 1. Another method of pointing to Brahman. Two birds staying on the same tree. Annihilation of sorrow through God realization. Supreme knower of Brahman. Helpful means to self-realization. Glory of truth. Nature of the supreme abode. Unique means of self-realization. Purification of mind. Realization of self in human body through purification of mind. A desirer of prosperity should worship the knower of Brahman. Chapter 3, Section 2. Desireless men get liberated by worshipping a knower of Brahman. Cessation of cycle of rebirth through desirelessness. Foremost means of self-realization, seeking the self alone. Other means of self-realization. Description of attaining Brahman. Liberation is theirs who gain clear understanding. Nature of liberation. Analogy of rivers meeting ocean. Realized men gaining Brahman. Knower of Brahman becomes Brahman. Instructions on transfer of this supreme wisdom. Conclusion. Preface to the revised edition. Mundak literally means shaving of the head. This Upanishad, therefore, is also called as the shaving Upanishad or the Upanishad of the tonsure. Shaving Upanishad because its contents remove the superimposed veil of ignorance obscuring the Atma through direct and penetrating exposition of the higher knowledge, like a razor removes the hairs from the head. The Upanishad of the tonsure because it is primarily intended for sannyasins to help them in their quest for the attainment of the eternal and the imperishable. This Mantropanishad, consisting of 64 mantras, rendering in a picturesque language, couched in varied and charming meter and diction, which are uniformly sublime, belongs to Atharva Veda. All serious sadhaks will spiritually benefit by practicing repeated contemplation upon its teachings. It is divided into 3 chapters or mundakas, and each of these in turn into 2 sections or khandas. This Upanishad contains some of the most famous, beautiful, and often quoted analogies in Upanishadic literature. After explaining the lower and higher knowledge, the changeless reality is pointed out to be all pervading, subtler, and the subtlest, the everlasting, the source of all. The creation of universe is explained with these beautiful analogies of spider, plants, and hairs on the body of man to have sprung out of eternal Brahman. Fruits of rituals and sacrifices are finite and transient. Good works, no doubt, lead them to heaven, where rewards are quickly exhausted and they are flung back to earth. Sincere sadhakas who are contented, self controlled, and tranquil are advised to practice austerity and meditation in solitude. Approach reverently a teacher well versed in scriptures and well established in Brahman. Such a teacher alone can show him the path to liberation. The imperishable alone is real. The things and beings arise from him and merge back into him, just as innumerable sparks fly upwards from the blazing fire and after burning themselves out merge back into the fire. All creatures descend from the imperishable, from him the sky, from sky the rain, from rain the food, from food the seed in man which he gives to woman. The self illuminous Brahman is all, ever present in the hearts of all. A method of penetrating Brahman is given with a very practical analogy. Om is the bow, the arrow is the individual being, and Brahman is the target. With mind absorbed and heart melted in love, draw the arrow and hit the mark, the imperishable Brahman. Lose thyself in him, just as the arrow gets lost in the target. One of the most glorious stanzas of the scriptures, generally chanted soon after the offering of camphor flame in Arati, without which no ritual is concluded, finds place in this Upanishad as also in Katha and Shvetashvatar Upanishads. Him the sun does not illumine, nor the moon, nor the stars, nor the lightning, nor indeed the fires kindled upon earth. Everything shines illumined by his light, reflecting his glory. Another well known analogy, a pointer to Brahman, is from this Upanishad. Two birds Jivatma and Paramatma, bound to each other in close friendship, because Jivatma is nothing but the image of Paramatma, seen through the medium of mind, perched on the self same tree, the body. One of them eats the fruits of the tree with relish, while the other looks on without eating. Jiva owning to identification with the body, and mind becomes the doer, karta, and enjoyer, bhukta, thus enjoys and suffers. But Paramatma remains untainted by any such modification and remains just a witness, neither enjoys nor suffers. Another famous dictum which has been accepted as the motif on our national emblem truth alone triumphs, not untruth, also finds place in this Upanishad. By truthfulness alone is one lead to the truth's eternal abode. Brahman, the supreme, which is subtler than the subtlest, facing that the farthest and nearer than the nearest, who resides in the lotus of the heart of every being. As rivers flow into the sea and in doing so lose their name and form, and thereafter are known as ocean alone, a wise man, freed from name and form, attains the Supreme Being, the finite, the eternal. Knower of Brahman becomes Brahman is another most often quoted phrase in Hindu literature is from this Upanishad. Thus, it is seen that a study of this Upanishad and reflection on the depth of meaning of the mantras is unavoidable for any sincere seeker of truth. Like Ishavasya Upanishad, even this Upanishad has a great similarity with Bhagavad Gita, both in contents and theme. Mundakopanishad emphasizes Shraddha to be practical text of Jnana, Yoga and Bhakti in a miniature scale. Repeated reprints. Shivoham. Introduction. It is an immense joy to me to present this volume to the world of seekers, not only because of its contents but also because of the labor of love that it represents. The commentaries added to each of the stanzas are compiled from notes carefully taken by the most uninitiated newcomers who got fired up into a newfound enthusiasm when they got slowly an entry into the calmer and serener fields of our sacred philosophic truths. The very concept of Jnana Yajna was conceived by me in a moment of love, and these yajnas were worked out in an atmosphere of love, depending upon love, demanding only love. The workers worked merely for love. Thus, every line in this book is a declaration of the sincerity and love that the youth of this country are capable of even today, when they are really guided and truly harnessed to work in an atmosphere of spiritual purity and religious fervor. The shortcomings and defects in these discourses are all mine. The beauty, the expression, the dignity, and the fire of enthusiasm that one frequently meets within the commentaries are all the sacred charms added to them by the very love hearts of the selfless workers who helped me throughout the general organizational work of the yajna and in the daily conduct of its programs. But for these nameless and numberless juvenile enthusiasts, the yajnas could not have been the glorious success that they were, especially when a stranger comes all of a sudden from the Himalayas to serve the townsfolk who are, in their critical judgment, always suspicious of a newcomer. I heartily thank all the volunteers who came to the various Yajnashalas as though to a temple of Seva and served the cause with a divine devotion, with Akhanda Prem and Om. Sandipani Sadhanalaya, Mumbai. They die oneself, Swami Chinmayananda. Mundakopanishad, peace invocation. Om Bhadram Karnebhi Shrunuyama Devaha Bhadram Pashyemakshabhiryajatraha Sthire Rangai Stuštuvagam Sastamunti Vyashema Devahitam Yadayo Swastina Indro Vruddhashravaha Swastina Pusha Vishwavedaha Swastina Staksho Arishtanemi Swastina Brihaspati Dadhatu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Oh, ye gods, may we hear with our ears always what is auspicious. O worshipful ones, may we with our eyes see always what is auspicious. May we live the entire length of our allotted life, hale and hearty, offering our praises unto Thee. May Indra, the ancient and the famous, Kushan, Sun, the all-knowing, the Lord of swift motion, Vayu, who saves us from all harms, and Brihaspati, who protects the spiritual wealth in us, bless us with the intellectual strength to understand the scriptures and the heroic heart to follow the teachings. Om, peace be, peace be, peace be. No Upanishad study ever started without the Guru and the disciple chanting together the peace invocation. Every day the teacher and the taught sat together and started their discourses only after a common prayer. In these days of acute skepticism, the educated illiterates would wonder what would be the power and strength, necessity and function of prayer in life. Forgive them, Lord, they know not what they say. Gopal Iyer is a poor, insignificant member of a big family, and he is in his own house is a victim of the mischiefs of even his youngest son. Sri Iyer earns his livelihood on a paltry pay which he gets as a police constable in the local Thana police station. Thus, he has, in fact, more than one personality in him: the father, the unhappy husband, and the mighty policeman. Now, when exactly does the ineffectual Gopal Iyer becomes the mighty hand of law as a policeman, a dread to the mischief makers, a phantom for our cyclists, and an ever-present ghost for every rash driver? Certainly, the policeman in him is not when he is in dhoti and shirt, rolling in the veranda of his house, persecuted by the mischiefs of his son, and bullied by the claims of his wife. The moment Sri Gopal Iyer gets into his khaki shorts and puts on his red turban, out of that very same personality, the policeman rises up, and thereafter he is a potent power to be reckoned with by every citizen. Similarly, my friends, each one of us is not merely an ineffectual, fearful, ever sighing, limited creature, but has within himself a personality supremely omnipotent, fearless, unlimited, all blissful and godly. Just as Gopal Iyer becomes a policeman by a process of self invocation and thereafter the policeman forgets to act or leave the weaknesses and limitations of Gopal Iyer, the father and the husband, so too we can, through prayer, invoke the divine in us and come to transcend our own today's personality and its defects and limitations. Prayer is the technique by which we tune ourselves to the highest perfection and thereby come to invoke in ourselves a great perfection of both the mind and the intellect. To pray is to be seated with the Lord at His feet. To pray is to aim at the target of Godhead with the arrow of intense longing, which has the sharp end of full faith. To pray is again to receive consolation and inspiration as a disciple at the hands of the teacher. In prayer are included praise, love, adoration, and holiness. Just before the study of the Upanishads, thus each day, the master and the disciple pray and thus invoke the best in them to come out through through a complete surrender to the mighty powers of an omniscient God principle. Every word in the Sandipan is a declaration hinting and at the vicious criminal instincts in ourselves. We have started employing God through prayers as our advocate, commission agent, doctor, and even an abater in our murderous intentions. This is not the fault of the technique. A dagger can be used in murdering the mother or protecting the family. If one vicious man murders his mother in a moment of antagonism, because of that we cannot declare that the dagger is a cruel weapon. Similarly, the technique of prayer is a blessing, but it is we who, by employing it for low purposes, vitiate the very institution of prayer. The great masters in the Upanishads knew no desire nor the sense world, which they had inquired into and discovered to be hollow and riddled with carping sorrows, held any attraction for them. They prayed only for the cultural evolution of the entire kingdom and beings. This national character of the Vedic period is stamped so faithfully in the words of the Shanti stanza in each of the Upanishads. Both the master and disciple sincerely wished and prayed that they should, during their spiritual life, see and hear nothing but auspiciousness. The sense organs, the eyes and ears, are the great grand trunk roads through which Satan enters the realm of the godly within man. The other sense objects do not so directly pave a way to the mental suicides in man. Both the outer scenes of viciousness and the inner murmurs of foul intentions directly sweep us in front of them and then defile the edifice of spiritualism in our bosom. Hence, the great prayer of the Vedic seers that they should hear and see nothing but goodness and purity. Here in the prayer of the Vedic masters, we have the Das capital of the Hindus. If each one in a society or a community is to ardently and sincerely pray so as to meet with only auspiciousness and act for the same. In such a country, at such an era of culture, jails will be redundant, slum area will be unknown, poverty unimaginable. This is a mere exception from the state of affairs available today. We may despair and fail even to visualize that such a perfect spiritual communism would ever be possible in the world. But this seems to be the pattern aimed at by the rishis of old, and their prayers clearly indicate to what perfections they brought their visions in their own times as facts realized. Again, not only they lived in a spirit of complete renunciation and acted on the principle of universal love, but that perfect generation, perfect in every sense of the term, was never blind to the necessities of the physical and the material world. They never complained of life. With an appetite, they wooed life and were ever impatient in their thirst for more of it. This is evident from their prayers that the Lord of the universe must bless them to live the entire span of life allotted to them in all healthy and perfect vitality. Their invocations to Indra, Vayu, Surya, Sun, etc. make us remember that Rama and Krishna, gods, are the products of a much later age. They were deities that were sanctioned in the Puranic times. In the Vedic period, the masters knew only the five great elements and such other manifestations to be the divine personalities, the Devatas. They are invoked here both by the Guru and the disciple. No peace invocation concludes without thrice repeating or invoking Shanti. The three repetitions are, it is explained by the Acharyas, addressed to the three groups in which all the probable obstacles in the study of the scriptures can be classified. They are the God sent Adidevik, such as lightning, thunder, or phenomenal Adibhotik, such as fires, floods, landslides, or purely subjective Adhyatmic, such as inertia, lack of faith, insincerity, and such others that arise from our own negativities. We shall every day open the discourses with the chanting of the invocation, and then we come to the thrice repeated piece for us. We too shall sincerely pray that our cooperative effort at the study may not be obstructed by any force of belonging to any of the above three groups. When the Upanishad seers, by complete elimination of their ego, achieved through the divine method of sublimation, reached the palace of truth, they entered therein to rediscover themselves to be the owners of it. That realm of perfection is indeed the world which, having reached, no one returned. However, there are some among them, rare birds, who had flown back in their divinely selfless game of sacrifice, of service. to lead, guide, and encourage the other manifestations of themselves unto the same truth. They try to express the topography of the realms beyond and the main paths by which one may reach it. At such moments of godly inspiration and intoxicating bliss, the rishis forgot to subscribe their names to their own masterpieces, the Upanishads. Thus, we have an incomparable literature on philosophy in the volumes of the Upanishads, the authors of which are unknown to us. We only know that there was behind these sparkling words of wisdom a personality which prevailed in the subjective experience of the very theme which he described in such a wealth of details. Even when we happen to write a fairly expressive letter or a satisfactory note, we cannot but show it to others and share the joy that is in creative art. All creative artists are thus a liability and nuisance with the gross male of action and trodders of beaten paths. A painter will beg at your feet to walk into his garret to enjoy his creation. A musician will go mad and make you miss your train. A writer will hang on to your collars and make you listen to volumes of manuscript. And Archimedes will forget his own nakedness and run along the roads of the city crying Eureka. These are instances when man rises for a fraction of a moment from his low identifications with his own limitations and gets a glimpse of a minutest ray of the Absolute. There is no true poet or painter or musician or scientist who would not willingly claim himself to be the entire author of their wondrous masterpieces. Creative art is at its best only when the limited ego makes an exit in all its entirety. Naturally, the Upanishadic seers, when they got themselves established in the experience of the realms that lie beyond the shores of the ego, could not claim any authorship to their declarations. Even at their best, they felt that they had not expressed anything about the actual majesty, glory, perfection, and completeness of the theme they wanted to handle. The infinite cannot be grasped or conveyed in terms of the finite. God defined is God defiled. Again, unlike the philosophy and the philosophical textbooks in Europe, in India, Upanishads were not commodities for growing rich or instruments for earning applauses. To the West, philosophy is one of the avenues for self gratification and self satisfaction. In the East, to the rishis and their true children, the Hindus, philosophy is for self adoration and self attainment. Hence, they, as it were, chose to remain behind the scene and sincerely felt that the knowledge they gained and gave expressions to was not theirs. They only happened to hear the mantras from within themselves as though spoken by somebody other than themselves. The term Shruti itself means that which is heard. Every disciple, when established in his own personal subjective experience of the truth indicated to him by his own master, becomes himself a master, and when he, in his turn, explained and expressed that state of experience to the seekers who approached him, did not claim the discovery for himself but only quoted his own Guru. Thus, our scriptural textbooks preserved their purity and chastity till today and have come down to us in the hierarchy of teacher disciple generations. We are not to allow ourselves to accept any declarations made from the platforms of the intellect and the mind as part and parcel of our eternal Vedas. If we do so, we too would have a philosophy that is changing every 15 years as in the West. In Europe, we find that with every changing vicissitude of national life, with every war, with every revolution, there is a thorough rearrangement of material values lived, and consequently there is a change in the attitude of the mind and intellect in life to life. With every disturbance in the brain cells in kaleidoscopic variety, we get a liberty of philosophies from Plato to death. But in India, the eternal Vedas and the Upanishadic truths are as true today as they were when they were taught in the flowery valleys of the sacred Ganges. Though the scientific developments, communal awareness, political consciousness, or international situations may meddle with our outer and inner worlds of objects and feelings, the experience of deep sleep, you will admit, is one and the same at all times. We may have progressed and thoroughly changed in the external setup in the world and the consequent inner psychological and intellectual assessment of things. But the experience of sleep is not different at any time. So too, the external experience of Godhood. This is the goal preached in the Upanishads. It is not changing or changeable, whatever be the outside change in our gross life. Chapter 1, Section 1, Mantra 1. ओम ब्रह्मादेवानां प्रथमः संबभूव विश्वस्य कर्ता भुवनस्य गोप्ता स ब्रह्मविद्यां सर्वविद्याप्रतिष्ठाम् अथर्वाय ज्येष्ठपुत्राय प्राह. Of the gods, Brahmaji, the creator and the protector of the universe, was self-born first. He gave out the knowledge of reality, Brahma Vidya, the knowledge of all knowledges, the foundation for all sciences, to his own eldest son Atharva. In Sanskrit, the word Brahma is used both in the masculine and in the neuter genders. In the masculine usage, it means that deity in the Trinity, who is the creator of the worlds of names and forms. When the word is used in the neuter gender as Brahman, it means the supreme reality, out of which everything came out, including Brahmaji himself. Here, Shruti says that when the very Creator manifested out of the pure consciousness as a specific creative urge, it was not the birth of an individual who is the product of the male and female seeds. Brahmaji is not a product of sperm and ovum, but he is self-born. He is a manifestation of the creative urge in the reality. He, it is said, was the first to give out the great knowledge of Brahmavidya to his own eldest son Atharva. A father can never consciously deceive his own son by giving him a knowledge that is false and stupid. However cruel we may be, none of us would dare to advise our own child that fire is cold to touch. This knowledge of the Supreme Reality is called Brahma Vidya. Maybe because it was first given out by Brahmaji or because it deals with Brahman. The term is used in the Upanishads for the eternal and omniscient pure consciousness. This Brahma Vidya has been glorified in the Upanishads as the science of all sciences, as the knowledge of all knowledges, as the foundation of all sciences. The Self is the life principle in us, and all other knowledge bits about the external world and the inner world are but modifications of the Self. Ordinarily, what we understand by knowledge is only an assortment of modified knowledge and not knowledge as such. Upanishads deal as they do with the vital principle in us, which is the light in the intelligence and because of which all other sciences are made possible. No dead scientist will any longer work at his table, nor will a dead artist add one more stroke to the half finished work on his canvas. No music can come out of a dead musician, no words from the speaker when the life has flown out of him. So then, since all our knowledges are possible only in a medium of life, the science that directly gives the knowledge of it is indeed the foundation of all other knowledges. Sarva Vidya Pratishtha. Second mantra. अथर्वणे यां प्रवदेत् ब्रह्मा अथर्वा तां पुरोवाचाङ्गिरे ब्रह्मविद्यां स भारद्वाजाय सत्यवहाय प्राह भारद्वाजो अंगिरसे परावराम. We have already seen the very knowledge which Brahmaji taught to Atharva. He taught it to Angi in ancient days, and he taught it to Rishi Satyavaha of the Bharadwaj clan, and Satyavaha taught it to Angira. The knowledge was so handed down from the greater teacher to the lesser disciple. We have already seen that when the rishis of the Upanishads gained a glimpse of the reality during their white heat moments of meditation, they were in such a divine state of an all-consuming inspiration that they never dared to claim the knowledge as their own. Each master, after his own personal experience of the truth, lived the ideal life of self-restraint, renunciation, and detachment. Into their all blissful life always entered a seeker, seeking a satisfaction for his spiritual unrest. When the kindly masters tried to guide their disciples, they did not claim their knowledge as their own, but only quoted in their turn their own masters. Thus, the purity of the scriptures had been kept up by this tradition of a divine copyright. We have here an entire line of Guru Shishya Parampara, teacher taught family tree, giving us the details of who taught whom. In this mantra, the family tree of knowledge has been traced out to Angira, and in the following mantras, you will find how he is the Guru to whom a disciple approaches with a transcendental question. The answer given to the seeker by Maharshi Angira is the contents of the Mundakopanishad. Shaunako hai mahashalongirasam vidhivadupasannah papracha kasminnu bhagavo vijñāte sarvamidam vijñātam bhavati te. The great householder Shaunaka, duly approaching Angira in the prescribed manner, asked, "What is that, my lord?" Having known which all these become known. Having known which all these become known. The great disciple of this inimitable Upanishad is not one of those important cowards and runaways from life. Here is a healthy mind and intellect equipment soaked to satisfaction in all possible experiences of life, and having intelligently lived an intense and active life feels an inward dissatisfaction even in the midst of the best that life can offer. Shaunak was not suffering from mental psychosis. He was not an embittered revolutionary. There was no desire suppression in him. He was not one of those products of mental hysteria or intellectual dysentery that we see today howling in madness from platforms and parapet walls. The trained species called political leaders. Shaunak was neither a tragic specimen of a bundle of superstitions that was hawked along in a handcart of leprous fanaticism and intolerance. In Shaunak, we have a full grown true son of the Aryans who alone is fit to enter the portals of the Upanishads, successfully live the life advocated therein, and with a joyous certainty reach the goal pointed out therein. With the above mentioned qualities in Shaunak have been indicated by one little phrase of inspiration, Mahashalah. The great householder, or a pious and charitable rich man of devotion and faith, who erected and maintained many a great yajnashalas, halls of Vedic scriptures. This great disciple, rich and prosperous, respected and revered in the society, approached his Guru according to the Upanishad is the prescribed in the prescribed manner. Today we find a commander in chief or a premier, a minister or a secretary visiting a master by appointment. When the Mandaleshwara or the Mathadhipati is advised to arrange pipers and drummers from the railway station to the ashram. Such an attitude of arrogance or even equality is ruinous and suicidal for the seeker. This is indicated by the phrase here, Vidhivat. The prescribed rule was that a disciple should reach the master in a spirit of humble adoration and complete surrender, with a passionate urge to know and with an indomitable will to suffer any amount of difficulties in living the life of retirement and privations. The disciples approached the masters of old with a significant sign of their surrender and their readiness to serve. When they approached a master, they always carried in their hands a bundle of dry twigs of a bundle or a bundle of fresh margosa neem twigs. The former is used in the sacrificial fire and the latter as the toothbrush. Nothing else could you in those days carry to the men of realization who remained in the forests, reveling in their own realized perfections. They had no need, and in no other way could you serve them. This prescribed rule is given to us, maybe to picture to us the attitude and the way in which in the ancient days the disciples reached their masters. Or maybe Shruti has an intention of indicating to us the ideal manner in which even today a true seeker who wants to dedicate himself and become a full-time sadhak must approach his chosen guru. Sri Shankara puts it to us that this statement must act as an injunction prescribed for the past as well as for the present and also for the future. Just as a lit lamp kept on the threshold must equally light up the interior of the room as well as the outer corridors of the house. Nowadays, not only that, we rarely get the chance to meet a true master, but even when we meet him, we know not how to approach him. Men of realization are like flutes. By themselves, they cannot sing. The music is to be brought out of them by our blowing. To go to a master and to sit in silent adoration is also a true satsang, but this method is available only between a master and a very highly advanced seeker. Ordinarily, we must pelt the master with all our doubts, absurd, stupid, imaginary, deep, and superficial. Only when we start asking questions can he get a glimpse of our personality, and only when he knows us can he open his mouth and serve each of us on the path of divine. On the path divine. In the Upanishads, we find that disciple approached the Guru and each asked a very pertinent and deep question of pregnant import and endless message. In the Upanishad, now under discussion, we have the great question put by the disciple to his master. The very question in its philosophical implication soars to the giddy heights of the transcendental, a height at which the mind forgets to flutter about. The intellect dares not to repeat its frog lips. Ordinarily, the material world in its field of inquiry comes to gain a knowledge, which is the knowledge of things. We have thus a knowledge of astrology, a knowledge of astronomy, a knowledge of physics, a knowledge of the table, of the book, of the pen, of this, of that, etc. All these give but a qualified knowledge and not knowledge as such. The disciple is here asking for that knowledge, knowing which all the other knowledges become known, without which no other knowledge is possible. The knowledge in which all the other knowledges exist and maintained themselves. Having known the ocean, all waves and ripples, foams and sparkles, whirls and bubbles are known. Having known the sun, all its reflections cast in wayside water pools and in the undisturbed waters of the lake Mansarovar are certainly known. Having known gold, we have known all that are made of gold. Similarly, Shaunak wants to know what is that knowledge, which is the very substance of all knowledges. In short, he wants to know the light principle in our intelligence by which knowledge of things are illumined for us during our existence. तस्मै सहोवाच द्वे विद्ये वेदितव्ये इति स्म यद्ब्रह्मविदो वदन्ति परा चैवापरा च. To him, Shaunak Angira said, there are two kinds of knowledge to be inquired, namely apara and para, lower and higher. To say those, the great seers of the Upanishads who know Brahman, the question you remember was regarding the supreme knowledge. The disciple asked what it was. To this, the answer given is supremely evasive in this stanza. These are learned critics who claim this as a weakness in the Shastra textbook. Sri Shankar duly meets these critics and answers them. Though the disciple is asking, what is it? The Guru, discovering the entire depth of the muddied mind and measuring the real difficulty of the student, starts answering in an elaborate way. Again, we are generally aware in our world of extrovertedness only of sciences dealing with knowledge of things. It is the duty of the Guru to guide the disciple from where they are in present to the greater heights. So then, in the most scientific way, Maharshi Angira starts his discourse with a classification of the entire possibility of knowledge. He says the knowledge possibilities fall into two distinct groups, the lower and higher, the terrestrial and transcendental. The question of the disciple is about the transcendental, and it is but the intelligent way for a teacher to negate that which it is not, and then start the assertion of what it is. The negation itself is an indirect pointer to the path which leads to that which is to be asserted. According to Shankar, the implication of the very question directly demands such an answer. The question concealed in its words not only indicates a thirst to know what that supreme knowledge is, but also expresses at once a doubt in the mind of the student as to whether there can be such a knowledge. The important of the question the import of the question is there a knowledge, O teacher, knowing which all other knowledges become known? And is there, if there be such a knowledge, in what way it is different from the ordinary knowledges known to us, and how can I attain it? Unlike these days, when we approach a master only to criticize and carp at him, in the day, in the days of our glorious ancient culture, seekers approached the teacher with reverence and adoration, and the like of which is not seen in the country today anywhere, except probably when an applicant, after a couple of years soul killing unemployment, approaches a petty commercial agent with an application for a paltry job. In the presence of the master, the disciple dared not talk too much. What he had to say, he said in the minimum number of words, leaving half of it unsaid in suggestive expressions readable to the kind and sympathetic intelligence of a guru. Hence, this answer and the way of treatment adopted by the teacher is quite appropriate, says Sri Shankara. तत्रापरा ऋग्वेदो यजुर्वेदः सामवेदो अथर्ववेदः शिक्षा कल्पो व्याकरणं निरुक्तं छन्दो ज्योतिषमिति अथ परायया तदक्षरम् अधिगम्यते. There, the lower knowledge is constituted of the four Vedas, the Rig, the Sam, the Yajur, and the Atharva, and the six Vedangas, Shiksha, phonetics, Kalpa, code of rituals, Vyakarana, grammar, Nirukta, etymology, Chandas, matrix, and Jyotisha, astrology. Now the higher knowledge is that which leads to immortality, or that which goes beyond the word meaning in languages. After having scientifically divided the total knowledge possibilities into two groups, the great Rishi is continuing here his theme of teaching by clearly describing the scope and content of the lower knowledge. Thus, we are told that all the four Vedas and six Vedangas, branches of knowledge that are complementary informations unavoidable in all attempts at a fuller appreciation of the Vedas, all being to the category of the lower knowledge. This must have been a staggering revelation to the student, who was then as much a victim of his generation as we are now of our own times. The great Shaunak faithfully believed the Vedic declarations and lived an entire life following strictly the ritualistic part of our immortal religion. And at the end of his lifetime, when he reached the feet of a master seeking the Supreme, he was told that he had squandered away the best part of his life in owing but the lower knowledge. This information must have been to that poor soul a dreadful shock. His eyes must have bulged out, his brows arched and raised. There, the eyes must have had a look in them which showed the confusion in the mind. Probably there was also a terrific sense of tragedy writ large upon his face. The master must certainly have noticed all this carefully, and hence he hastens to comfort the disciple by saying that the supreme knowledge is that which transcends the word meaning of the Vedas and that which is dealt with after the chapters describing the ritualism, and that the supreme knowledge is that which directly deals with the state of immortality, the satisfying terminus of life's pilgrimage. There is a beautiful punning upon the word akshara, and probably in no other literature in the world has ever a man so successfully expressed different meanings of such depth of significance and wealth of import through this literary trick called punning. Akshara means that which has no destruction, immortal, and it also means the alphabet. Thus, the contents of the Paravidya are that knowledge which leads the pursuer to the rediscovery of his own true nature, being nothing but the immortal selfhood. And this branch of knowledge is not in the word bulk of the Vedas but lies beyond the words in the sacred and secret caves of significances, to reach which the expressions in the Vedas are but narrow footpaths. Mother Shruti, standing at every turn in the life's thorny paths, not only instills courage to the weary pilgrims, but also significantly points out to them the easy paths which will take them to the eternal rest house in the land of perfection. But foolish pilgrims as we are, intoxicated by our very vanity, we have no leisure to take any note of that message or to understand her directions. To a drunken driver, the warning posts along the road are mute impediments. यत्तदृश्यमग्राह्यमगोत्रमवर्णम् अचक्षुश्रोत्रं तदपाणिपादं नित्यं विभुं सर्वगतं सुसूक्ष्मं तदव्ययं यद्भूतयोनिं परिपश्यन्ति धीराः. That which is invisible, ungraspable, unoriginated and attributeless, that which has neither eyes, nor ears, nor hands, nor legs, that is eternal, full of manifestations, all pervading, subtlest of the subtle, that imperishable being is what the wise perceive as the source of all creation. This stanza represents the most perfect definition of the indefinable. If it would not be an exaggeration to say that the greatest achievement of the Aryans consisted in their successfully warping out of articulate sounds a language as perfect as Sanskrit, then we may say that Sanskrit has reached its fulfillment in this stanza. There is no Shastra in our Hindu literature wherein this mantra has not been more than once referred to and quoted. Shankara's pen cannot move down, sometimes even a page without scribbling at least a part of this mantra. No Pandit can open his mouth without expressing the ideas contained in this. In short, this mantra is the summary of the highest said in all the Bibles of the world. After describing the contents of the lower knowledge, here the Rishi, in his infinite kindness, is making a daring attempt to explain and express the infinite in terms of the finite. Naturally, we who are accustomed to transactions in the finite world find it difficult to comprehend and grasp the full import of the expressions used. If a statement is higher if a statement in higher mathematics is not intelligible to an advocate or a lawyer, he must be certainly glad to pass a judgment thereby and declare that higher mathematics is meaningless. And yet, this is exactly what you and I are doing. Without equipping ourselves with the necessary preliminary knowledge, we jump into the great science of living as life, as discussed in these textbooks, the scriptures, and when we cannot understand them, as unjustly criticize it to our own damnation. I shall try to give you a peep into the unplumbed secret caves and treasure houses of wealth of teachings that lie so beautifully concealed behind some of these expressions. Let us now take the mantra phrase by phrase. Invisible. The supreme reality is invisible because what is visible today should be an object of seeing. We are seeking the center of life force within ourselves, which is the very seer in us, making use of the instrument of vision. The eyes, the seer is looking out to see the seen. With the same instrument of vision, the seer cannot see himself. Let me take an example. With a telescope, an observer observes the moon, but with the same instrument, the observer cannot observe himself. For when the observer becomes the object, there is the observer. Where is the observer at the eyepiece of the telescope? Never it is possible in life to make the subject and the object function together at one and the same place. However tired you may be, you cannot ride upon your own shoulders. You may see everything with the eyes, but with your own eyes you can never hope to see one thing, namely your own eyes. Thus, a seeker who is seeking the subject cannot see the subject, because if he sees, it would be only the seen that is the object, and hence the reality, the life spark, is described here as invisible, the graspable. ungraspable. If it is not seen, a doubt may arise in our mind. It can probably be grasped by the mind. And this is negated by the Shruti with her expression agrahya. Mind cannot conceive the truth since the capacity to conceive the truth is lent to the mind by the very life center which it is trying to conceive. Let us try an example. A driver at the steering wheel while driving cannot be run over by the same car. The moment the driver leaves his seat and rushes to the front of the car, it stops since it has no motion of its own and so cannot knock him down and run over him. Similarly, the Atman, the dynamic power behind the mind and that vitalizes the mind, that makes it possible for the mind to grasp things cannot be grasped independently by the mind. Should the mind grasp the reality, it should stand apart from the object it so grasps, and the moment the mind divorces itself from its connections with the Atman, it becomes a dead inert stuff which cannot grasp any idea anymore. Hence we say that the Supreme is ungraspable. Unoriginated. Everything created or formed must perish or die away, because that which has a beginning has also an end. The eternal or the immortal is that which has no end, and if there should be no end, it should have no beginning also. Again, the absurdity in presuming a beginning for the reality would be that we will have then a state of affairs which we will have to describe in terms of a ludicrous paradox. We will have to say there was a time when reality was not there. Real. Attributeless. Attributes are properties, chemical and physical, noticed by the sense organs or felt by the mind or deduced by the intellect. In short, attributes can only be in the objects illumined by the object subject. Again, a substance or a thing is that which has some attribute. That is, wherever there are objects to where the world of substance is finite, so then the eternal changeless reality could have no attribute, because to consider the Supreme as having attributes is to condemn it to extinction. Neither eyes, nor ears, nor hands, nor legs. Earlier, we are told by the Shruti that the Supreme is not visible to us. We may then jump into a misunderstanding that even though we cannot see it, it may be seeing us. This is denied here by the scripture. The Supreme has neither the organs of knowledge nor the organs of action. The eyes and ears, the hands and legs are vehicles which can function only in Him, but He needs none of these instruments for His own existence. The all pervading needs, the all pervading, needs no instrument to recognize himself itself. There are no objects in him other than himself. There is no ignorance in him to be discovered with some knowledge newly gained. He is knowledge itself. Again, action is not possible for the all pervading when you are already filling up the entire space in a given chair. There is no going or coming for you in that very same chair. For every inch of space in that chair is paripurna with you. Similarly, the pure consciousness, which is all pervading, feels no necessity to act or to move. Again, action is generally nothing but an expression at the fulfillment of desires. The Paripurna reality in its own all full nature can desire nothing, and hence there is no action possible in it. Eternal, etc. The other epithets used in the mantra are all the logical conclusions which one must arrive at when one accepts the above described ideas. That which is unoriginated must be eternal, that which is eternal must be all pervading, and if it is all pervading, then the entire world of matter must be, in a sense, nothing but its own manifestation. And all pervasiveness indicates a state of the highest subtlety, and such a stuff should necessarily be imperishable. When Rishyangera thus defined the Supreme in the above exhaustive and supramental definition, surely Shaunak the disciple must have got more than confused and confounded under the very weight of significance of this statement. The poor disciple must have felt himself crushed. There must have been an expression of disbelief and a confession on his own sense of hopelessness spreading on his face, as though to reassure his disciple that this eternal factor is realizable by every trained and prepared intellect. The kind Rishi explains positively that every pure intellect made sensitive for the purpose can discover this reality. The word used here, paripashyanti, is not merely a sudden vision or a hasty glance, but a thorough, intimate, personal, subjective experience of the entire truth in all details and in every part of the whole. And with this discovery, the mantra states, the discoverer discovers the Supreme as the source of all the finite world of names and forms. Bhuta Yonihi, as the womb of matter, every effect has a cause. There is no effect possible without a cause. Causation hunting is the very function of the intellect. Where there is no cause effect relationship, the intellect is stultified. So, to a disciple who is in the plane of the intellect, A teacher must talk in terms of the student's own native language, the language of causation. Hence, the scripture here says that the ultimate cause for all the world of perishable and changing names and forms is that eternal factor which has been so intimately defined in the earlier portions of this very same mantra. To say that the eternal is the source of the finite is something like saying the delusory serpent came from the rope, or the ghost came from the post, or all the pots came out of the clay womb. In fact, my friends, the Shruti would ultimately guide you all to the fact that there never was finite world except in the brain and intellect of you and me.
Jaya Shri Ram, Jaya Raghuram, Janaki Jeevana Sundar Ram, Devaganarchita.
The Supreme alone, supremely
Jaya
exists
Shri
all
Ram,
alone.
Jaya
There is not
Raghuram,
even a trace of our
Janaki
sun,
Jeevana.
moon, and stars. Our universe, our world, its economic, political, and domestic problems, your ego or my worries, this Yajnashala or this Yajnadhyaksha, nothing is fact, nothing in fact exists. Nobody talks to anybody. There is neither Shruti, neither the teacher nor the disciple. That alone exists, which is at once the center of the whole and of the part. यथोर्णनाभिसृजते गृह्णते च यथा पृथिव्यामोषधयः सम्भवन्ति यथा सतः पुरुषात् केशलोमानि तथा क्षरात् सम्भवतीह विश्वम्. 7. As the spider projects and withdraws unto itself the web, and the herbs and plants sprout out from the earth, as hair grow on the head and body of man, so from the imperishable being comes out the universe. The economy of the scriptural style is floated here. If the three different pictures given are only to emphasize the one and the same point of comparison. The rishis have the unique style of using minimum words with maximum significance in the sacred mantras. Certainly, analogies are the best instruments of expressing the inexpressible. But even in the usage of analogies in the scriptures, we never find an extra stroke added to it just for its own sake or for mere literary beauty. With this preliminary knowledge of the style of the Upanishads, if we evaluate the why and the how of this triple picture painted in the same mantra, we come to glimpse through the picture a triple purpose. The spider creates the web out of itself and withdraws it into itself. The material of the web becomes the very substance of the spider. In short, the web is nothing but a modified form of the spider itself. Similarly, the Supreme Reality itself is the lock, stock, and barrel of this atrocious looking mechanism of samsara. The moment we hear of creation in our tradition of associated ideas, we come to picture the Lord as pot maker sitting up and creating the world out of a substance which is other than himself. This is denied, and this wrong concept is readjusted in our mind by this mantra with its picture of the spider creating the web, not out of anything other than itself, but out of its own stuff. Herein, the philosophy of the logicians is positively blasted. They believe that there is pradhan without which creation is impossible. If the spider picture gives us the how and the why of the entire game of creation, why should Shruti give yet another analogy in the picture of the herbs sprouting forth from the earth? This is to deny the possible false suggestion which is in the previous analogy. The spider creates the web certainly for a personal end, for a personal gratification. Thus, the Supreme Reality must have a personal purpose to create you and me, and the scheme of things around us, which we call as the world, to deny any purposeful motive behind the creation. We have the second analogy. There is no motive in the earth to produce or nourish the plants. It is without any effort and without any personal motive that the plants come out of the earth. Similarly, the world too comes out of the real. Again, the infinite mercy and love of the rishis forecast that even this analogy may, in its turn, sabotage the spiritual aspirants with yet another misunderstanding that the Supreme is a dead, inert, insentient matter like the earth, incapable of knowing or feeling. In order to avert this calamitous fall into a false rut of thinking, we have here the third picture. Shruti says that the finite has come out of the infinite as hairs grow on the head and body of man. So long as the man lives as an expression of his life in him, we have the hairs sprouting on his body and head. This entails no suffering on the part of the individual. Nobody can get even an hour's leave of absence from his office for the purpose of hair growing. Effortless as an expression of the very life in the man, hairs grow and thrive. Similarly, the finite is, in its own way, an expression of the vitality in the reality. Thus, on the whole, the three pictures distinctly give us three sets of ideas which we must comprehend fully in order to grasp the entire process of creation. They are: out of him the world has come without the intervention of any other cause other than himself, and in the end, the projected world is absorbed back again into the divine. The Supreme has neither the effort nor the purpose with which the spider creates the web. Creation is an effortless, purposeless projection, a divine Leela. The Supreme is not a dead inert matter like the earth, but is a conscious living vital personality, a positive entity, an all pervading essence, absolute existence, knowledge, bliss, Satchidananda. Eighth mantra. तपसा चीयते ब्रह्म ततोन्नमभिजायते अन्नात् प्राणो मनस्सत्यं लोकात् कर्मसु चामृतम्. 8 8 English was 8. In brooding, meditation, or continuous thought, tapas, the total creative urge Brahmaji swells with the joy of creation. From him, food is produced. From food, the prana, the mind, the bhutas, the world, and the karmas and their fruits. The word tapas has been very often misunderstood as austerity. The word tapas has come together in the folds of its various significances, austerity also. It is the true scriptural meaning of concentrated thinking that the word tapas, it seems, has been used here. Shruti elsewhere says, Aikagryam Paramam Tapaha. Development of single pointed attention is the supreme tapas. Here, Shruti, after explaining the nature of the supreme reality, is now trying to describe the various stages in the process of creation. The theory has it that the creation was never a sudden and accidental outburst of the entire world of plurality, but it had an ordered scheme about it. Herein we are told how through various stages of manifestation the scheme of things that we know of now has ultimately evolved out itself. The creative urge in reality, in its own potency, swells in an impatience of self-expression, and then from that the whole world of objects constituting the plane of matter emerges out. From matter, life as known to us manifests. Prana here means life. Prana is the center of all activities. That there is a close relationship between the prana and the mind is quite well known. When a mind is agitated, the rhythm of prana is quick. When the mind is at rest and at peace, the prana is smooth and quiet. Where there is no prana, there the mind cannot be. Thus, Upanishads rightly conclude that from the pranas the mind springs forth. When the mind is fully manifest with the pranas, from that state of emergence of the finite, we get the five great elements, which are termed here as in the Upanishad as Satya. Since compared with the finite names and forms in the world, the five elements are relatively infinite and eternal Satyam. The combination of the five great elements is the entire world of phenomena that we see around us. Here it may kindly be noted that the word loka in its etymological meaning in Sanskrit is not merely this globe, but it means a plane of experiencing. When there is a field of experiencing, and where the above mentioned food, vital air, and mind are brought to play in this field, the individual indulge in selfish and egoistic actions. Actions end, but in their reactions, actions end, but in their reactions. The reactions of actions are nothing other than the very actions fulfilling themselves. These reactions are the fruits of actions are termed by the Upanishad as Amrutam, immortal. Again, in a relative sense, the actions may end, but their reactions do not die away till they bring their effects upon the mind and the body. In this sense, Shruti calls fruits of actions as immortal. Are all these produced? The Creator names and forms and nourishment for all. With this stanza, the first section of the first chapter of the Mundakopanishad is completed. Naturally, Shruti is trying to summarize the entire chapter in a pregnant statement, at once brief and beautiful. The Supreme Reality, the light of the intelligence, is nothing but pure wisdom, and as such, it is generally aware of all the happenings in the entire cosmos, and it being the light that illumines every mental wave in the vegetable, animal, and human life, and it being the existence principle in everything that is there, cannot happen anything which is not directly under the light supreme, nor can anything exist but in the lap of pure existence. Thus, pure consciousness, being by nature absolute existence knowledge, knows everything, and it knows every detail of all that it knows, says Mother Shruti. The pregnant import of those two expressions, Sarvavit, Sarvajna and Sarvavit, is not easy for a gross intellect even to conceive readily and all of a sudden. We have already dealt with the theory of the Shruti that the Supreme Reality, through a process of brooding, invoked the creative power that was already there and swelling with excitement and the joy of creation, started the game of creation in himself by projecting a dream world himself, but out of the very substance of himself. Hence, the idea in the mantra, out of this total creative urge are created. The Creator, the names and forms, and the nourishment, the energy to sustain the lifeless life of the projected world, to maintain them. In Sanskrit, it is an idiom, especially in its scriptural use, to use name and form, which means our modern term individuality. End of chapter 1, section 1. Chapter 1, section 2. तदेतत् सत्यं मन्त्रेषु कर्माणि कवयो यान्यपश्यंस्तानि त्रेतायां बहुधा सन्ततानि तान्याचरथ नियतं सत्यकामा एषवः पन्थाः सुकृतस्य लोके. 1. The various karmas which seers found in the mantras are true and were much practiced in the Treta age or in the three Vedas. Practice them always with a desire for the true results. This is your way for attaining to the world of the fruits of karma. One of the four yugas, that is cycles of universe, namely Satya, Treta, Dwapara and Kali Yuga. In the last section, total knowledge possibilities were divided under two heads, the higher and the lower. The Rishis also gave out therein a general hint as to what constitutes a Paravidya and what exactly constitutes the Paravidya. In this section, we find a rough and ready sketch of the entire kingdom of the lower knowledge, between many dots and dashes scribbled in haste, only to laugh at its inefficacy in bringing about eternal goodness or permanent happiness. Thus, the section starts with a call to all Satyakamas to follow faithfully the various rituals ordered in all the Vedas. They are true, says the Guru, true inasmuch as they give the desired results. In case the karmas are properly done as advised in the Vedas. The particular word used here, Tretayam, may mean either in the Treta age or in the three Vedas. That a seeker should, in his initial stages of sadhana, follow the rituals diligently is being very emphatically expressed in this mantra. The word diligently, niyatam, is very pregnant. It does not merely suggest a faithful and blind performance, but insists upon a regular practice which is continuous, intelligent, fresh, and cheerful. Rituals followed as a routine lose all their potency. A routine in itself cannot constructively recreate a developed human personality. It is only a deliberate, intelligent training of the head and heart of an individual gained through diligent abhyasa that can bring about this desired effect. A dull habit or an inert routine pursued under the blind force of a dead faith is ineffectual and quite undesirable as a measure in the spiritual revival of an individual. Rituals in themselves cannot and will not lead a seeker to his goal. An act, however noble, cannot in its result procure the eternal, the act being itself a finite one. We shall get a more exhaustive discussion on this point later on in this section. Second mantra. Yada lelayate harchis samit. An explanation is given of the Agnihotra because of its practiced. There are two readings of this stanza, one with the last two words. When the flames of the sacred fire are smoky and dim, the oblations are not to be offered. The oblations are offered only when the flames are brightly dancing in energetic cheer. Again, the oblations are to be offered at the space between the 2 points on the right and the left, where the ghee clarified butter is poured. This point is called okay, avapasthana, avapasthana in the ritualistic terminology. The mantra indicates that the karma itself limited has its own rules ordering where and when it is to be performed. The aim of the teacher seems to be when the entire section is read together as a whole, only to point out to the disciple that the karma is painful, complicated, and difficult. The laboriousness of the rituals, which becomes a shackle upon a full grown seeker in his flight across the realms of the higher meditation, is vividly brought out in the following stanza. यस्याग्निहोत्रमदर्शमपौर्णमासम् अचातुर्मास्यमनाग्रयणमतिथिवर्जितं च अहुतमवैश्वदेवमविधिना हुतम् आसप्तमांस्तस्य लोकान् हिनस्ति. 3. If a man's Agnihotra sacrifice is not accompanied by the new moon and full moon sacrifices, Darsha and Purnimasa, by the 4 months of the autumnal seasons sacrifices, Chaturmasya, by the sacrifice of offering first fruits at harvest time, Agrayana, or if it is unattended by guests or is without offering or performed without the worship of Vishwadevas, or not performed strictly according to the rules and rules laid down in the Vedas, then such karma destroys all his worlds till the 7th. In this stanza, the teacher, by his exhaustive enumeration of all the minute do's and don'ts, is aiming at the creation of a desired effect upon the disciple. No man of discrimination with an awakened intellect would need a greater argument to persuade him to give up the blind ritualistic path. The karmas are limited on all sides. If Agnihotra is not followed by a strict adherence to all the above mentioned subsidiary acts of charity and kindness, seasonal rituals and self-discipline in itself can not only not give its promised blessing, destroy the 7 worlds of the performer. There is another interpretation that if performance of ritualistic karma is not done properly, the performer cannot attain any of the higher 7 worlds. Namely Bhu, Bhuva, Suva, Mahajana, Tapa, Satyam, meaning thereby that he then falls to lower worlds of animals, plants, etc. The 7 worlds can be considered as the 7 generations, 3 ancestors and 3 descendants, and himself. Thus, a ritualistic karma not done properly would have consequences not only upon oneself but upon one's own father, grandfather, and great grandfather, and upon one's own son, grandson, and great grandson. In short, the Upanishad is severely emphasizing the drudgery of rules in ritualism and is trying to wean the disciple away from all desire prompted karmas. Only when the mind and the intellect have thus totally renounced their desires and their preoccupation with the desire prompted action, can we hope to meditate upon and rise above into the subtle worlds of constructive meditation. At the same time, I must add that to you and to me, the karmas as they are now available for us are very, very important. Selfless service, japa, puja, sandhya, meditation, etc. are very important to a seeker in his early stages of preparation. It is only through these karmas that one gains a well integrated personality. It is only then that he comes to feel the cumbersome brutalities of the rigid rules of ritualism. A temple fulfills itself successfully in a bhakta when he comes to inquire into the nature of Godhood, the nature of himself, the structure of the world, and the relationship between these three. All at this moment, the integrated personality of the Bhakta, though physically standing in front of the sanctum sanctorium, has grown to such a stature that he no longer can be contained within the confines of any gopuram, steeple, or dome. Fourth mantra. काली कराली च मनोजवा च सुलोहिता या च सुधूम्रवर्णा स्फुलिङ्गिनी विश्वरुचि च देवी लीलायमाना इति सप्तजिह्वाः. 4. The 7 flickering tongues of flames are Kali, the black one, Karali, the terrific one, Manojava, the swift as mind one, Sulohita, the deep red one, Sudhumra Varna, the smoke colored, Spulingini, the sparkling, and Vishwaruchi, the bright, all shining, variegated one. There is another reading, namely Vishwarupi of all forms. This is not as happy as the reading we have accepted. The real import and the significance of various classifications and types of flames discussed herein have no parallel in modern science, since the Western world has not taken fire as a topic of inquiry, and yet, to some extent we know the different areas in a candle flames discussed in elementary physics texts. Whether there are any special significances attached to these different types of flames or not, it is not within our knowledge today to declare. However, in this mantra we can find not only the scientific approach but also the thoroughness with which the ancient rishis dealt with their topics. The mantra is a clear example where science allied with literature begets a knowledge divinely glorious. In their very sound, the terms used for the different kinds of flames have a beauty of their own. Vedic period was a time prior to the beauty embodiments as in Ram or in Krishna. A seeker who was in the workshop of spiritualism had to learn his early meditations upon the different types of and kinds of flames that rose from the sacrificial fire during yajnas and yagas. The fire, you must remember, was the idol of the Vedic period to worship at and to concentrate upon. It is by concentrating upon the different flames that the Upanishad students of the golden age of Hinduism sharpened their minds and intellects to soar to the deathless glory of Vedic perfections and knowledge. Fifth mantra. एतेषु यश्चरते भ्राजमानेषु यथा कालं चाहुतयो ह्यातदायन् तन्नयन्त्येताः सूर्यस्य रश्मयो यत्र देवानां पतिरेकोऽधिवासः. Paths. 5. He who offers oblations in proper time into these shining flames, him the oblations as sun's rays lead to the place where the one Lord of the gods Indra resides. Earlier, the Upanishad pointed out the strict rule governing the eternal promises of karma kanda or the ritualistic portion of the Veda. Now, this stanza explains that when one has strictly followed, as per all the rules, the rituals advocated, he will be the archangel to guide the departed soul to the realms of its experiences, its own fruits and actions. The scriptures says that the very ahuti potency in the form of a sun's ray would guide the subtle body. The stanza, without the necessary background for it, would read as though it is some fantastic story believed by a humanity at its childhood. The Western readers of our scriptures have often come to this hasty conclusion, and our young intellects, shaped and stamped out in the meal of Western education, will also indulge in parrot-like repetition of these erroneous and absurd conclusions. Philosophically, the sun stands not for the self-effulgent, ever-burning, hot orb of the heavens around which the planets and stars make their endless pilgrimage, but it represents the total effects of all the karmas done by the entire living generation in the world at a particular period of time. In a very striking manner, this idea has been exhaustively discussed in Upanishad during the discussion there on the Suryopasana or meditations on the sun. There is nothing revolting in this idea, only we are not accustomed to this novel definition, which is in fact nothing but an extension and an amplification of the knowledge we already possess. Our limited knowledge on the behavior of nature, climatic conditions, etc., has given us enough data to believe that the sun in the heaven is the unquestioned controller of the life of this globe. Loka means a field of experiences. If the sun were a few yards away from us, or if it is a few yards nearer to us, you all know what a total revolution it would make on the geographical features of the globe, the climatic situations in the world, and therefore also the very quality and quantity of the living world upon this globe. Each one of us, according to the pregnant law of karma, is here commissioned to live through and exhaust the fruits of one's own actions. In order to live completely and fully the reactions of all karmas done by every one of us, we must have a world constituted and planned exactly as it is now. We have already found that the conditions here on the globe are controlled and maintained by the position, intensity, and nature of the sun. Thus, philosophically, sun is but a bundle of the total fruits of actions. I know the very novelty of this idea will make it slightly difficult for you to swallow it in one gulp. Think independently on this idea in small mouthfuls and you can easily digest it fully and completely. If the sun be thus a bundle of our own karma phalas, then in the greatest of all philosophical textbooks, the Upanishads, Rishis have naturally the right to make use of the idioms and expressions as they have used in this mantra. In the light of the above, the Ahuti in the form of the sun's ray, guiding the performer to the realms where he could enjoy the fruits of his actions, is perfectly scientific and divinely poetic. Ray of the sun would then be a term denoting the very good mental impressions created in the minds of the performer during the conscious and devoted good actions. Death is but a total and permanent divorce between the gross body and its subtle content. The mind and the intellect equipment constituting the subtle body renounces once for all its claim on a given structure of matter, and with reference to that inert matter development, we say it is dead. For example, friends, let us all for a moment mentally go from this Yajnashala to China Bazaar. Every one of you can picture yourself moving on the platforms of the crowded bazaar. It is not merely a feeling, the feeling is well protected by your reasoning capacity. Partially now you are dead to the Yajnashala. Now let us enter wherever we like mentally in that bazaar. Surely all of us could not have gone mentally to one and the same shop in China Bazaar. Out of you, one of you might have gone to a bookstall, another to a shoe shop, and still another to a cloth shop, and myself to a coffee house, and the ladies all must have gone to the sari shop. Every one of us had the freedom to walk into any shop there. What decided in each one of that? We must go only to that shop each of us had gone to. For example, I myself could have gone to the sari shop as freely as I walked into the coffee shop, and yet the natural way in which I walked into the coffee shop had been very powerful, and probably even a battalion of horses could not have dragged me to the sari shop. What could have been the force of compulsion in me that dragged me among all the places of the to the coffee shop? It could not have been that some other total force forced me to go there. No destiny intervened between me and my action. It was nothing but my own mental rut, which gave me a definite turn to my own present thoughts, dragged me to the gates of the coffee house, irresistibly naked me, and provided for myself an imaginary cup of strong coffee. Similarly, a very sacred act performed with deep sincerity molds the performer's mental structure and vasana contents. This is so beautifully explained in this stanza. When the Rishi says that the very ahuti in the form of the sun's rays leads him to the Lord of the Devas, this term also needs a background understanding of the Vedantic Prakriya. Each sense organ is believed by the Shastras to be presided over by one Devata element. Thus, they say that the eye is presided over by the sun, the ears by the space. The modern educated man, even when he is sincere, may come to despair at these antiquated ideas expressed in such a seemingly unscientific language. But it is all because we fail to understand the style of the Upanishads or the scientific background of these expressions. It is well known that the organ of vision, the eye, or the sense organ of sound, the ear, cannot function unless they are brought into play in a medium of light or space. If the light principle were not in the world, we would not be able to make use of the instrument called the eyes, for the eye can see forms only when the forms are in a medium of light. If the world is eternally in darkness, the entire humanity would have been blind, although we may have the organ of vision. Similarly, we know the scientific fact that sound can be made uh, only in a medium of space. If there were no space, we could not make sound, and if sound were not, we would have no object to be illumined by the ear, and so the organ of sound can function only where it is presided over and blessed by the element space, Akash. Thus, each indriya has its own devata, meaning that it has its own necessary condition to function. These presiding deities are called as devatas or devas in Sanskrit terminology. This term deva has in the spiritual language something like seven different connotations, all of them almost identical, and yet they have among them some subtle distinctions. Thus, Deva means he who shines, gives light, he who bestows wealth, he who causes good health, he who shows the path, he who makes others shine, he who sends out music, he who imparts knowledge and wisdom. In the Vedavani of Professor S.K. Gupta, it is very interesting to read the different meanings of Devata. We also know that the mind is its function of reception and correct correlation is the ruling and governing factor of all the sense organs. In that sense, the scripture accepts the mind as the king of the Indriyas, and naturally its presiding deity becomes none other than Indra, the king of gods. Briefly, then, the mantra means the conscious actions performed with a deep desire to gain the fruits thereof develop the necessary traits and impressions in the mental plane, that the outward actions leave a clear trail upon the mental stuff seems to be hint up suggested by the secret meaning of this sacred mantra when it is expressed in terms of our modern science and our university vocabulary. Mantra 6. एहेहि त्रितमाहुतयः सुवर्चसः सूर्यस्य रश्मिभिर्यजमानं वहन्ति प्रियां वाचमभिवदन्त्योर्चयन्त्य एष वः पुण्यः सुकृतो ब्रह्मलोकः. 6. Come hither, say these brilliant oblations unto him, and carry the sacrificer through the rays of the sun, addressing to him the pleasant words of praise. This is the holy world of Brahma gained by the good works. We follow here the same analogy as in the last mantra, and the oblations through the vasanas created by him. The rays of the sun literally usher the worshipper to the world of his enjoyments. In China Bazaar, you reached the sari shop, or I entered the coffee house, invited by our individual vasanas. Similarly, the vasanas created in the mind of the performer of the yajna, as it were, guide him after his death to fix his identity with such a form under such a team of circumstances wherein his total experience would be the exact enjoyment of the fruits of the oblations. Mantra 7. प्लवाह्येते अदृढा यज्ञरूपा अष्टादशोक्तमवरं येषु कर्म एतच्छ्रेयो ये विनन्दन्ति मूढा जरा मृत्युं ते पुनरेवापि यन्ति. 7. Undependable, frail is this boat of yajna, is said to be manned by 18 supporters on whom depend the lower ceremonials. Those ignorant persons who acclaim this as the highest are subject again and again to old age and death. Rituals have certainly a place in the technique of self-perfection. They are means to a greater end, but a majority of Hindus have come to confuse the means to be the fulfillment in themselves. They refuse to rise higher than the rituals, and Mother Shruti is here mercilessly weeping such ignorant devotees to greater endeavor and higher achievements. 18 supporters of yajna are constituted of the 16 priests Ritviks along with the householder Yajman and his wife. These 18 are important limbs in some kind of rituals which are performed and sail out when performed. The performer to truth. He may gain a more intenser life of acuter happiness in the subtler planes of consciousness called in the scriptures as the higher worlds, such as the heaven, Satyaloka or Brahmaloka. But whatever be one's status and position in the heaven, it is only a sojourn here, there, not an eternal assertion of the immortal Godhood. And as such, the performer of the ritualistic rules, after having enjoyed the heavenly joys as the fruits of his great and meritorious actions, will have to अविद्यायामन्तरे वर्तमाना स्वयं धीराः पण्डितं मन्यमानाः जङ्घन्यमानाः पर्यन्ति मूढा अन्धेनैव नीयमाना यथान्धाः. 8. At 8. Ignorant beings existing, gloating in the midst of ignorance, but fancying themselves to be wise and learned, go round and round, oppressed and miserable, as blind people when led by the blind. The very scheme of this section is to laugh at fanatical ritual mongers and to wean those individuals in whom ritualism has fulfilled back to the greater endeavors in higher meditations. Shruti has pointed out the enormous responsibility of a ritualist and the terrible difficulty in performing a yajna properly, strictly to the prescription given by the Vedas. Not being satisfied with this, the Shruti here, out of her extreme love for mankind, pities and laughs at those who have allowed themselves to be shackled in the little world of desire prompted actions. Actions, desire prompted actions. The sincerity of Mother Shruti becomes evident beyond all doubt when we find the same mantra repeated in Kathopanishad and in Upanishad. For further elucidation on this mantra, refer discourses on Kathopanishad 1, 2, 5. We must not forget that this Shruti at the same time belongs to the Veda, and the Vedas, being eternal knowledge, shall not suffer any contradiction. In the earlier part of the Vedas, namely in the Karma Kanda, there is a sincere advocacy of the performance of the karmas. Later on, in the Upanishadic portion, we find in stanzas like this a vehement condemnation of the same. This would look as though it is a palpable contradiction, but it is not. When your son is in the elementary classes, you have to insist that child should daily read and learn the multiplication table. But when he has come to the standard of pure mathematics, it would be absurd if you are to insist that he should yet read and learn every day the multiplication table, even during his postgraduate studies. In the primary classes, arithmetic tables were to him certainly his Bible. But in the college classes, it is redundant inasmuch as the student may then has amassed the knowledge. Similarly, rituals have an elementary purpose without which nothing higher is possible, but to continue wasting the entire life in mere ritualism would be a terrible wastage, and hence Shruti is crying down such wasteful policies in the spiritual sadhakas. Mantra 9. अविद्यायां बहुधा वर्तमाना वयं कृतार्था इत्यभिमन्यन्ति बालाः यत्कर्मिणो न प्रवेदयन्ति रागात् तेनात्तुरा क्षीणलोकाश्चवन्ते. 9. Engrossed in the many ways of the ignorant, these people childishly think that they have gained the end's goal of life, but being subject to passions and attachment, they never attain knowledge, and therefore they fall down wretched when the fruits of their good deeds are exhausted. This stanza is again a repetition for the purpose of emphasis. Shruti is not angry in the ordinary sense of the term. Her anger is like the anger of a mother when her child has not succeeded in life as she had planned him to. Here, the actual word balaha, children, is used while mentioning the blind followers of rituals. In her endless love for the generation, she cannot stand the sight of even one single soul wandering in the jungles, having lost his way. In this stanza, we must hear only the love call of the Mother Shruti to those who missed the way to come back to the grand road to truth. To such seekers, ritualism is but a marketplace where they pay the price to get the things that they want. Prompted by desires and wishing to pacify them by fulfilling them, they perform the karmas as advised in the Vedas. We have already seen in the beginning only in performing karmas and not dare to go beyond the planes of this initial spiritual training is explained in this mantra by the epithet ragat. It is the desire, as we have seen, that generates the flow of thoughts in the mind, and it is again the quality, texture, quantity, and the direction in which the thoughts flow that determine the actions. Thus, the karma cannot be where desires have ended. Thoughts cannot end where desires have not ceased. Where thoughts are bubbling here, there, the mind must be gross with its dense power. Therefore, Manonasham, annihilation of the mind, is possible only when desires are annihilated. This is equal to saying that these men, wise and energetic, devoted and sincere, when in them ritualism has fulfilled itself pursue this wrong path of wasteful stupidity only because of the germs of desire that still breed in their hearts. Now the diagnosis is complete and the cure is suggested by scriptures. In every religion in the world, there is one and the same way, namely to be intelligently discriminative and be poignantly aware of the world of objects. In the following mantras, we have the prescription given out by the Mother Shruti herself. इष्टापूर्तं मन्यमाना वरिष्ठं नान्यत् श्रेयो वेदयन्ते प्रमूढाः न तस्य पृष्ठे ते सुकृतेऽनुभूत्वा इमं लोकं हीनतरं वा विशन्ति. 10. These ignorant men fancy sacrificial and charitable acts as most important, do not know any other way of bliss. Having enjoyed in the heights of heaven the abode of pleasures, they enter again into this human life or even inferior animal worlds. Never was the world without this bitter controversy between the two principles of life, namely laborious extrovert action and peaceful introvert seeking. Karma, jnana have been a tug of war, unbroken at all times, and this endless controversy itself, we may say, was the main motive force which have Hinduism such a perfect and tight science of spiritualism. In the history of the world also we find that periods of karma yielding place to periods of jnana, which in its turn give place to karma again. We are now living in an age of karma, and that is why we find a general cry against life of retirement and renunciation. Today, the so called educated class, in their spiritual illiteracy, cry down the very vital life of meditation because with their mint house intellect and bank hearts, they read nothing but their own checkbook scriptures, and their own sins come to haunt them. Similarly, they cannot understand any life that than the life of sighs, tears, and sweat. That desire prompted actions alone constitute life was a theory as old as the scriptures, and there is evident from the mantra in the Shruti. But that advocacy of the greater life of meditation is also equally old, is seen in the very fact that the very Shruti is condemning here the life of desire prompted actions and in advising a greater life in higher meditation. Meritorious acts are divided into two groups by ancient rishis on the basis of the textbook that allow it. These noble acts of spiritual merit advocated in the Shrutis called Ishta, Agnihotra, the fire kindling ceremony, traditionally enjoins on a Brahman householder learning and teaching of Vedas, austerity, truthfulness, hospitality, and the ceremony called Vaishvadeva, which comprises, among other terms, the feeding of animals and birds. Purto comprises of public utility welfare works such as sinking of wells, construction of water storage tanks, and establishing dharmashala for travelers, opening schools, hospitals, temples, laying of gardens, feeding the poor, and such other works without any desire for fruit. Ishta constituted the yajnas and yagas, and those described in the smrutis constituted the digging of a well, opening a path, building a dharmashala, feeding the poor, tending the sick, helping education, which is called Purtam. The Upanishads say that one should be a colossal fool to claim that these and these alone constitute the supreme-most act of divinity, and that there is nothing superior to it. This condemnation of the scriptures is because the meritorious acts of both the categories and their reactions only provide for us a subtler field of experiences called the heavens. As a result of the meritorious acts performed by him, here below we have one day will have one day, on exhausting the merit balance against him, to return back to the lower planes of consciousness. Return में कौन लोग where pain and struggle, failures and successes, appointments and disappointments, loss and gain, death and birth, etc. can be his experiences again. Nakasya. This word is being used here in a peculiar etymological meaning of it. Kam means in Sanskrit bliss. Akam naturally means then pain. No akam means that state where pain is unknown. There is a particular reason why Mother Shruti was specifically chosen this word to point out the heavens. She wants us to understand that though in heaven there is none of the pains of mortal life, it is only a relative happiness there. The denizens in heaven, including the Vaikuntha Narayana, that is Lord Vishnu, are creatures in pain compared with the absolute state of perfection, which is the theme of the Upanishads. and hence Mother Shruti refuses to define it as a positive place of happiness, but only says that it is a plane of existence where the soul killing sorrows of the life are not present. In this mantra, we have also a positive declaration against the optimistic view held by some of our Panditas, including some of the most sympathetic gurus. According to them, having once got the form of man, that ego can never go down to any lower plane of existence, whatever be his actions in life. This idea is being blasted into smithereens in this mantra. It is also noteworthy here that a man can, as a result of his vicious, deliberate criminality, come down upon the ladder of evolution of the existence of even a miserable worm in a dustbin. In this particular mantra, it is said that having enjoyed the fruits of all meritorious acts, the ego center may enter again this world or a lower one. 11th mantra. तपश्रद्धेये युपवसन्त्यरण्ये शान्ता विद्वांसो भैक्षचर्यां चरन्तः सूर्यद्वारेण ते विरजाः प्रयान्ति यत्रामृतस्य पुरुषो ह्यव्ययात्मा. 11. But they who perform penance, tapas, with faith, shraddha, in the forest solitude, having control over their senses, are learned and are living the life of a mendicant, go through the orb path of the sun, their good and bad deeds consumed, where that immortal and undecaying Purusha is. Comparing the slaves of ritualism with the men of realization, Shruti is bringing forth the glory of sannyasa to the forefront by this mantra. She says that those who perform karmas with the desire-born motives reach only temporary joys, from where they will have to come back to this painful finite world of mortality. On the other hand, those rare few who have gained the required spirit of renunciation and who have retired into the life of meditation in solitude, depending for their existence only upon self, reaching them in unexpected chances to them. Shruti promises a perfect success. Through the orb path of the sun, Surya Dvarena, the route taken by the subtle body after death in the world are of two kinds, the moon path and the sun path. The sun path is called the Uttarayan and the moon path the Dakshinayan. It is the theory of Vedanta that those who merely perform karmas on departing from here take to the southern path, that is Dakshinayan, to live in the Pitruloka, and enjoying there for an interval they come back. Those who not only perform the yajnas and yagas, but along with these also meditate upon the great truth of our philosophy, that is, those who perform karma and upasana, at death leave the body and take the northern route, Uttarayana. and through the corridors of the sun, go beyond and enter the Brahmaloka, the supremost world of the Creator. There, these lucky souls not only live a life of the highest joy but also attained to the great discourses given to them by Brahmaji, the first Guru of Brahma Vidya. It is a belief that they, along with the Creator, at the end of the Yuga, during the Pralaya, get merged with the Supreme Absolute Awareness. This method of liberation is technically called Krama Mukti or gradual liberation. But as far as a jnani is concerned, as in the case of a Buddha, a Shankara, a Ramakrishna, Paramahamsa, a Ramana or Arvindo, there is no going and coming. They reach what is called as Kaivalya Mukti, pure liberation, or Sadhya Mukti, immediate liberation, or Jivan Mukti, in this very style, life. There is no going to this place or that for them, for they have become the all while here itself. 12th mantra. परीक्षलोकान् कर्मचितान् ब्राह्मणो निर्वेदमायान् नास्ति पृथक् कृतेन तद्विज्ञानार्थं स गुरुमेवाभिगच्छेत् समित्पाणिश्रोत्रियं ब्रह्मनिष्ठम्. 12. Let a Brahman, an aspirant, after he has examined the worlds gained by karma, acquire freedom from all desires, reflecting that nothing that is eternal can be gained by karma. Let him, in order to obtain the knowledge of the eternal, take superficial fuel, samit, in his hands and approach that preceptor alone who is well versed in the Vedas and is established in Brahman. If, as Shruti says, yajnas, yagas, and such other rituals cannot in themselves take a seeker to the supreme state, it is natural that a burning aspirant would wonder what he is to do. Here in this mantra, the duties of a true seeker in whom the rituals have fulfilled themselves are explained. Brahmana. It is a tragedy of the decadent Hinduism that this divine word of sacred meaning has come to be misinterpreted and put to endless abuses. Today we have come to believe that Brahmana means the son of Brahmana, or son of a Brahmana. This interpretation was recognized to some extent even in the time of Shankar because of the efficient hold of the Sanatan Dharma scheme of living, which the Brahmanas then strictly followed. But once we have fallen away from those values of pure living, we have deteriorated in our culture to such an extent that today no agraharam and a residential enclave where Brahmanas live and or a grant of land given by kings to Brahmanas for sustenance. Agraharam can, with any sense of propriety to the Shruti declarations, claim Brahmanhood. The qualities required in a true Brahman are not physical, they are to an extent mental, to a large degree intellectual, and in the main spiritual. He who has all these qualities, purity of thought, clarity of reasoning, sincerity of motives, and an insatiable eagerness to realize that spiritual fullness, whether he be a butcher's seat, he be in a butcher's seat, or in front of sacrificial fire, whether he be in a puja room or on a railway station, whether he be on a Ganges banks or on the bazaar streets. He is a true Brahman in the scriptural sense of the term. In short, the word Brahmana means a full grown and fully evolved human being who is sensitive enough to feel an urge for a greater existence and then continuously striving to gain it and is continuously striving to gain it. Such a Brahman is being advised by the Shruti here to examine ruthlessly the various fields of the results that they can gain due to the ritualistic acts of piety and ceremony. Mother Shruti here is directing the attention of such an inquirer to consider whether he can ever gain the unmade through any known methods of making. The idea is that moksha is not and cannot be the result of any action performed, for in that case, like a pot made by a pot maker, moksha also will be a perishable state. The eternal should be and is ever the unborn, for all that are born must necessarily die. When a clearer thinking intellect thus measures the benefits of ritualism, it becomes clear to him that they are not worth the trouble, and hence he becomes disinterested in the greater joys promised in the higher abodes. Thereafter, the seeker shall have a thirst to know only that knowledge knowing which everything else becomes known. In order to know that, in order to realize the self, the scriptures the scripture advises that a Brahman must approach a guru. In this mantra, we get the clearest definition of a perfect guru. It is noteworthy that nowhere else in the bulk of our scriptures we have such a complete and exhaustive definition of a guru. A guru should have two great qualifications who have plunged into silence. They have no words to express the inexpressible. Shruti alone is the mighty magical instrument by which the inexpressible is, at least to some extent, expressed. Conversely, we also have hundreds of Panditas, erudite in their scholarship and perfect in their knowledge of the Vedas. They could give us readily the exact word meaning of any portion of the scripture and give learned discourses on any chapter or verse. And yet, they cannot serve the world a thorough knowledge of the science of religion, which is in the Upanishads and is one who is also rooted in his own subjective experience of that plane of consciousness which is indicated by the Shruti. Such a master alone can convincingly propagate the Shruti and kindle enthusiasm of the youth to brave the difficulties and stand the challenges of life till he slowly reaches the eternal goal of life. Samit Panehi. Here is a bit of instruction. Here is a bit of instruction to a perfect student on how he must approach the teacher. In olden days, the practice was to carry a bundle of Samit fuel, or to may be, or it may be margosa neem twigs, used for brushing the teeth, as a symbol of the disciple's readiness to surrender totally to the master and tune himself through continuous and tireless service. Somewhere I have seen another interpretation given to this significant sign. According to that author, the twigs may symbolize that the disciple is declaring that he has reached the feet of the Guru after having burnt all his negative impressions, animal tendencies, egoistic vanities, and foolish attachment with the sense world. Whatever it is, it only indicates that the disciple in the olden times sought a master that reached his feet not through appointments made by letters or telegrams or telephone calls. Today, if we are doing so, we are thereby denying to ourselves the maximum benefit which we could otherwise gain out of these masters by the practice of approaching them in that attitude of surrender and true seeking. Verse number 13. तस्मै सविद्वानुपसन्नाय सम्यक् प्रशान्तचित्ताय शमान्विताय येनाक्षरं पुरुषं वेद सत्यं प्रोवाच तां तत्त्वतो ब्रह्मविद्याम्. 13. To that pupil who has thus approached him in a proper manner, whose mind is at rest and whose senses are subdued, let the wise teacher truly teach that Brahma Vidya, science of Brahman, by which the true immortal Purusha is known. Here in this stanza, Shruti is given a direction to the teacher class. Earlier, she instructed and advised how a true Brahman, having lived intensively the ritualistic life for a long number of years, must come to discriminately analyze the results gained by him. When he has realized that even Brahma Loka is but a subtler form of sorrow and limited perfection, then he should approach a perfect master for his initiation into the greater secrets of life. And when such a disciple approaches a true Guru, here the Shruti dictates that he should explain the truth in all its purity to merely the word meaning of the scripture, but also the indicative meaning by which limited words of the scripture explain the inexplicable. End of chapter 1, section 2. Chapter 2, section 1. Mantra 1. Tadetat satyam yatha sudipta vas, a true seeker, one in whom the lower rituals have fulfilled themselves to the folds of a higher knowledge, had even laughed at ritualism. In this second chapter, the attempt is to point for us an idea of a supreme knowledge with its contents, functions, and qualities. The Supreme Being infinite will not and cannot come within the expressiveness of language, which is but an expression of the finite. The infinite cannot be expressed in terms of the finite, and yet no other scripture in the world, we can most assuredly say, has succeeded in pointing out to us the infinite so successfully as the Upanishads have done. Some wondrous expressions pointing out to the infinite and some perfect techniques of explanation are employed in this chapter. In short, we may say that without this chapter, Mundakopanishad could not have been considered as a scripture at all. The unprepared Western readers invariably feel confused and confounded when they directly take up the study of the Hindu scriptures without the aid of a true master. The opening stanza of this chapter gives us an example wherein an uninitiated would feel an everlasting confusion. In the previous section, the Shruti asserted that the ritualistic part of religion is the truth. Now, in this chapter, Shruti with equal emphasis is declaring this is the truth, the theme of supreme consciousness, which lies beyond all the fields of ritualism. This kind of emphasis asserting at one point that ritualism is the supreme, and within the same Upanishad asserting with equal emphasis that philosophy is the supreme, sends the Westerner screaming mad, and he throws up the sacred text and declares Hinduism is madness systematized. The educated Hindus, nurtured and nourished upon these poisonous Western criticisms, also come to repeat the same opinion with a parrot like faithfulness. Thus, the more educated a Hindu is, the less respect he has for his own Bible. There is no contradiction at all here to those who know the technique of the Shruti. The rishis of the Upanishads first insisted that ritualism alone is supreme in order to encourage a seeker to go through those ritual initial techniques in self perfection. Having lived a few years in sincere ritualism, the seeker develops his mental and intellectual integration and higher meditation. If from the very outset Shruti had declared that ritualism is a subsidiary activity, certainly no seeker would have gone through it, but would have straightway walked into the halls of meditation only to sit and sleep, to avert this calamity. Out of sheer kindness, Mother Shruti is thus encouraging the rituals. In the previous chapter, a very complete and broad hint has been given defining the field of the higher knowledge. Out of that formless, eternal, unborn, pure consciousness, how these finite, mortal, limited individuals have emerged would be the greatest of problems in the heart of a seeker. No seeker who comes to seriously inquire into the what and how of the names and forms that he seeks around him, that he sees around him, can choke this doubt in his mind. There must be some relationship between the infinite and the finite. Since, according to the declarations of the Upanishads, the finite is nothing other than the infinite. An incomparably beautiful and inimitably complete analogy is used here to explain this relationship. The individual is nothing but the Supreme itself, in as much as the individual has risen from the Supreme itself. Risen from it, exists in it, and merges back into it. The example of a spark from a big fire is made use of here. The spark has risen from fireplace and it floats about and around the very same fireplace, not very far away, and when it has exhausted itself in eating up the material, the ash is thrown out and the fire in the spark disappears, and since it cannot go anywhere else, it merges with the very fire of the fireplace. It is a theory in philosophy, accepted in scientific observations also, that an effect can only perish to become the cause. The seed dies away to become the tree. Water, when decomposed, becomes but hydrogen and oxygen. The physical structure made up of five elements rots to become nothing but the five elements. All ornaments made of gold can change only to become a mass of gold. Similarly, a spark of fire riding on a little matter seems to have wandered away from the main fireplace and existed as such only during such time as it has not finished away with its eating up of the matter. It is only a conditional fire that comes out as a spark, and the spark exists only so long as the conditioning existed. When the consumable matter has been reduced to a speck of ash, the fire essence in the spark rolls back into the total fire in the fireplace. Similarly, an individual seems to exist, exhibiting all the qualities of a reality only so long as the conditioning is not eternal. A jiva is born only to burn up his finite, his fruits of actions, and when this is accomplished, the body falls down to perish, and the spark of life rolls back to merge with the total life. दिव्योऽयमूर्तः पुरुषः सबाह्याभ्यन्तरो ह्यजः अप्राणोऽयमनः शुभ्रो यक्षरात् परतः परः. दोनों. To the to self resplendent, formless, unoriginated, and pure, that all pervading being is both within and without, anterior both to life and mind. He transcends even the transcendental, unmanifested causal state of the universe. If all names and forms are nothing but sparks of that spirit riding over specks of matter, seemingly consuming it, then what is the exact nature of the pure spirit? This would certainly be the question that will arise in the mind of every consistent seeker. An attempt at its definition, descriptive enough to give a direct clue to any sensitive aspirant, is being made here in this mantra. He is a mass of light without any form, not a tapering light, not an orb of light, not a pinnacle of light, but light without shape, light without form. In short, as Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa has put it is a light without any of its qualities. Consciousness expresses itself in the awareness we are capable of. When we say that we are aware of any object, feeling, or idea, we mean that that object, feeling, or idea is in a beam of light emanating from us and illumining it for us. Thus, the life spark in us with reference to its manifestation as awareness in us, the Shruti is describing as Divya. From what we have said, it is possible that we may conclude that the self is a limited speck within ourselves only. In order to remove the misunderstanding, the Shruti explains that this self is equally within and without, and self is possible only in a medium of truth. This all pervading light of wisdom should naturally be unborn since it is eternal. This all pervading reality is described here as without prana and without mana, without mind. Just as a driver has no car or even a part of a car in his physical anatomy, mental structure, intellectual apparatus, or physical, spiritual personality. And yet, the car cannot and will not move without the driver. Similarly, the pure consciousness, the self, has neither the mind nor prana, and yet neither of them can function without the pure and the greater than the great. The Supreme is pure because it is but the illuminator of both purity and impurity. The sun neither gains the merits of an yajna performed in its light, nor does he gather to itself the sins of a murder committed in its rays. The sun is but the illuminator of both good and bad actions performed in the daylight. Similarly, pure consciousness is eternal and pure in the sense that our variegated sins have no direct contact with it. It is said that the Supreme is greater than the great, only to emphasize the all pervasiveness of the pure consciousness, which in its turn emphasizes its supreme subtle nature. In saying that the consciousness pervades it, Shruti means that even when the world of names and forms is in a state of unmanifested condition, it exists only in consciousness. Mantra 3. एतस्माज्जायते प्राणो मनः सर्वेन्द्रियाणि च खं वायुर्ज्योतिरापः पृथिवी विश्वस्य धारिणी. 3. From him are born the prana, life, the mind, all the organs, the sky, akasha, the wind, which supports all. From the supreme reality explained in the previous mantra was created the entire world, knowable and knowing objects. Thus here we have the enumeration explaining that the 5 elements, the 10 senses, the prana and the mind came out of Brahman. It is a Shastric declaration that the form quality of creation has come out of 17 tattvas. Also, it declares that the entire world of activity, prana, of feelings, mind, of cognition, sense organs, and the outer world of the 5 great elements have all the same source in the eternal reality as explained in the previous mantra. In case the pure existence, namely the reality, is moved from the created world, we shall find the observed world of plurality dwindling itself into nothingness or non-existence. In Vedanta, this idea is explained by means of an analogy of a piece of cloth in which some patterns and forms are woven in by the same thread as that of the cloth. So long as the cloth is observed as such, the names and forms represented in it are true and real. But when we draw out the thread, we find that all the names and forms merged themselves to form a bundle of threads. And if the threads are unwound, nothing remains but a quantity of cotton. In the final analysis, the names and forms all on the piece of cloth, including the very cloth piece, were nothing but a seeming transformation of the cotton stuff. Removing all the cotton, neither the cloth nor the pattern can remain. In cotton, it exists. Out of cotton, it has come, and into cotton alone can it merge back. Similarly, the pure consciousness, the eternal pure wisdom, is that knowledge. Knowledge, knowing which every other knowledge becomes known. Out of this absolute knowledge has all the world of names and forms emerged out, and in it they exist, and into it they merge back. It is in order to make us understand this single idea in all its pregnant imports that the Mother Shruti has started this section with ever so many mantras, such each in different ways, expressing this one and the same idea. Mantra number 4. अग्निर्मूर्धा चक्षुषी चन्द्रसूर्यौ दिशश्रोत्रे वाग्विवृताश्च वेदाः वायुः प्राणो हृदयं विश्वमस्य पद्भ्यां पृथिवी ह्येष सर्वभूतान्तरात्मा. 4. Fire, Agni, is its is his head, sun and moon his eyes, four quarters or directions his ears, the declared Vedas his speech, the air his breath, the universe his mind, heart, and the earth originated from his feet. He is indeed the inner self of all beings. Continuing the analogy in the last mantra, there will not be any contradiction if we were to describe the cotton as the sum total shape of all the patterns in the piece of cloth. Here in this mantra, we are having a description of the cause in terms of its effects. Technically, the Supreme identifying with an individual physical structure, as we always do in our waking state of consciousness, is called Vishwa, and the reality of the self identifying with the entire world of gross forms is in Vedanta called Virat. In this mantra is the description of from Virat form of the formless reality. It is the realization of every great saint or prophet that in all religions of the world that the individual separative concept of a self-arrogating ego is a myth and a false glory. From the beginning of the end, the one continuous labor in Vedanta is to prove to its fulfillment faithful followers that the microcosm individual is nothing other than the macrocosm, the total. Here, this idea is slightly developed in saying, the heaven is his head, his eyes are the sun and the moon, space his ears, etc. In Vedanta, in its own technical language, it says that the eye is presided over by the deity, the sun. The ear is presided over by the deity, the quarters. It is such statements that upset the Western reader and their Eastern products, namely ourselves. When the Vedanta Shastra says that the eye is blessed by the grace of the sun, it only means that in a medium of light alone can the eyes function. So too, only in a medium of space can the sound travel, and only where sounds are can the ears function. The entire mantra is thus the description of the finite in terms of the description of the infinite in the terms of the finite. Mantra 5. तस्मादग्निः समिधो यस्य सूर्यः सोमात् पर्जन्य ओषधयः पृथिव्यां पुमान् रेतः सिञ्चति योषितायां बह्वीः प्रजाः पुरुषात् सम्प्रसूताः. 5. From him are produced the sky, which is the first fire, whose fuel is the sun. From the moon, the rain clouds, the second fire. From the clouds, the herb that grow on the earth, the third fire. From these herbs eaten, the man, the fourth fire, who sheds his seeds into the woman, the fifth fire. In this way, in this manner, many living beings are born from the Purusha, the all-pervading being. It is such stanzas that confuse and confound the library readers of the scriptures. From every wayside bookstall, cheap editions of all scriptures in the world temptingly invite the passers-by. The publishers also see to it that the editions are within the reach of all, and yet none of the editors has cared to see whether the stuff printed in them is intelligible to the man in the street or a casual railway passenger. And thus, when one with no preliminary knowledge plunges into these great scientific textbooks, he finds himself lost and confounded. It is at such moments that we need a guide who is well versed in these shastras and who is also well versed in these experiences of life. In order to understand the stanza, we must know that in the Chandogya Upanishad, a method called the meditation of the fires has been advised herein. Mother Shruti is talking in the language of that Upanishad. Sky, whose fuel is the sun. The statement made is to facilitate the student's meditation for the purpose of self purification. Here, the word sky means the very concept of space. We know that our mind and intellect can function only in the medium of space, time, and causality. The concept of space and the consequent sense of limitation has come to us as a reaction of our past actions. For the enjoyment of which each one of us has taken in this incarnation, the moment any one of us transcends the bondages of space time, no more can this world and the experiences of this world assert themselves in our cognition. We have already found earlier that the physical sun has its own philosophical import. Philosophically, the sun represents the sum total of reactions of all the actions done by the total living world, from worm to man. As such, it is a wondrous analogy, poetry at its best, to say that sky is the fire whose fuel is the sun. The difficulty in understanding it is in this. Understanding it is in this. Plato has taken the pain of Shelley to paint Cleopatra in order to represent the mighty beauty of the universe. In India alone, we find philosophy and poetry molded together into one idol of beauty and perfection. From the moon, the clouds, the second fire. This is to be considered as the second great fire. The moon is considered as that which causes the essence in the herbs and the seeds. Probably we will have to wait for some more years for the West to discover and declare to us that moonlight has a definite function in nourishing the seeds and fruits with their vitamin contents. However, it is known that It is known. It is known all over the world among the agriculturalists that seeds dried up in the sun during the day and exposed to the moonlight in the night become very healthy seeds for sowing. That from the rain the seedlings grow needs no commentary. When these vegetables are eaten, the male secretes its seed, secretes its seeds which are thrown into the womb of the female where germination takes place. This is the pedigree or the sequence by which from the supreme the multiple plurality of created beings come to exist, says the Shruti. Sixth mantra. तस्मादृचस्साम्यजोंषि दीक्षा यज्ञाश्च सर्वे क्रतवो दक्षिणाश्च संवत्सरश्च यजमानश्च लोकाः सोमो यत्र भवते यत्र सूर्यः. 6. From him are the Vedic hymns, the sacred chants, the sacrificial formulae, preliminary rites, sacrifices, ceremonies, sacrificial gifts, the time of the sacrifice, the sacrificer and the worlds, purified by the sun and the moon, which come to one as the fruits of sacrifice. 7. तस्माच्च देवा बहुधा सम्प्रसूताः साध्या मनुष्या पशवो वयांसि प्राणापानौ व्रीह्यौ तपश्च श्रद्धा सत्यं ब्रह्मचर्यं विधिश्च. 7. From him also the gods of various orders, the celestials, the men, the beasts, cattle, the birds, and inbreeds and outbreeds, the corn and barley, though devotion, thought, devotion, truth, self-control, and values of life were born. In these two mantras, we have the details showing how from the subtler, grosser things have evolved, ultimately to make up our known world of things and feelings. The first mantra is clear in itself due to the various sacrificial rites which in this connection may be considered to incorporate in its scope the entire world of actions. According to the actions, we create our fields of activities to live therein and gain experiences. And hence, here is the hint in the phrase, the world purified by the sun and the moon. The modern world known sufficiently of the influence of the sun and the moon upon the available aspects of nature, which directly governs the experience as natives of this planet. In the second mantra, we have the combination of the sequence of creation to emphasize the fact that every living creature and its activities of life have come from that Supreme Soul, the eternal, pure, connect consciousness. After the corn and barley in the above list, the rishis enumerate thought, devotion, etc. A few well-known critics have seemed to stumble here, not finding a real connection at this place. In fact, there is No confusion of thought here. Corn and barley stand for food, and food is the nourisher of thought. If one were to fast continuously for some few 40 days, one would experience that one's mind refuses to entertain any thought. On the other hand, when one starts taking more and more food in small doses, one would find that in proportion to the amount of food consumed, the volume of thoughts and the frequency of their movements also increase. Thoughts, when directed towards a great ideal with reverence and love, gain for themselves a greater potency, and such thoughts are together called devotion. He who is thus devoted to the great ideal, divine and spiritual, cannot but take on himself vows of truthfulness and self control. He who has these qualities will naturally have a new code of high values in life, and with severe alertness he shall always endeavor to live up to them. Eighth mantra. सप्तः प्राणाः प्रभवन्ति तस्मात् सप्तार्चिषः समेधः सप्तहोमाः सप्त इमे लोका येषु चरन्ति प्राणा गुहाशयानीताः सप्त सप्त. 8. From him are born seven pranas, the seven flames, the sevenfold fuel, the sevenfold oblations, as also the seven worlds where the pranas move. In the case of living creatures, 7 and 7. On a rough reading, this would naturally confuse anyone, for in its literal meaning, it has no sense at all. But it is the style of the scriptures to use such code language. The Shruti mantras are, as it were, very brief lecture notes taken down by the most intelligent students while listening to the discourses of the rishis. If anyone were to read the class notes of a college student, he is sure to get himself confused unless he himself has attended the lectures. Similarly, this mantra looks as though it is a short formula only to bring to the memory all that the student had heard in the lecture theatre. From the Supreme Self are born the seven sense souls in the head, two eyes, two nostrils, two ears, and one mouth. Shankar explains these even pranas as seven sense organ spots localized in the head. These seven flames are referred to in discourses on Prashnopanishad 3.5. The seven flames mentioned are the seven powers of cognition that beam out, as it were, to illumine their respective objects. Thus, through the eyes, intelligence beams out to perceive form and color. Through the ears, vitality shoots out to illumine sound. Each sense organ can illumine only its objects. With the ears, we cannot recognize form, nor can we see sound with our eyes. A flame can be maintained only when there is fuel for it. Here, the fuel for these cognition reads are nothing but their objects themselves. If there were no sound at all, naturally we would not have recognized that we have an organ called the ears that can perceive sound. In this sense, sound is the fuel that maintains the flame of sound consciousness shooting through the ears. The oblation referred here must naturally mean the knowledge gained. When the power of cognition shooting out through the senses comes in contact with the respective objects, oblation is that which is thrown into the flames and which sinks down into the very source of the flame, there to get itself digested and burnt out. The seven lokas in this beautiful metaphor, maintaining the general spirit of poverty in the stanza, we must take the word loka here to mean the sense centers in the intellect. It is known to the scientific world that there are definite nerve centers or the inner principles of the senses without which the external senses cannot be by themselves function nor control the eternal the sense organs nor control the sense organs. The vitality of these centers retires and takes rest, as it were, in the cave of the heart where intelligence remains when the individual is in the state of deep sleep. That the word prana here cannot be the vital air is clearly shown by this suggestive description that they move and function in the cave of the heart. The pictorial language, though it adds a beauty and extra joy to the glory of the scriptures, is to us a stumbling block in understanding the correct meaning, because we are not used to it in these days of commercial literature and cablegram poetry. Mantra number 9. अतः समुद्रा गिरयश्च सर्वे यस्मात् सन्दन्ते सिन्धवः सर्वरूपाः अतश्च सर्वा औषधयो रसश्च येनैष भूतैस्तिष्ठते ह्यन्तरात्मा. 9. From him all the oceans and mountains, from him the rivers of every description, from him too all herbs and saps by which the subtle body exists, encircled by the gross elements of matter. In the previous mantras, we have been told that from the Supreme Reality came all the dynamic aspects of nature and the entire kingdom of living organisms. This enumeration might leave in the minds of the readers a doubt that the inert matter may have a different source of existence altogether. In order to remove any such fallacious conclusions, Shruti is here indicating that even the mountains, oceans, rivers are all manifestations of the same eternal truth. Earth, when watered by the rivers, becomes a favorable field for planting for favorable field for plant life, and then plants grow. In the plant is the sap, and by digesting the sap, the beings preserve and maintain themselves. They grow and cultivate their bodies. Food, in its subtlest potency, nourishes the mind and intellect, which constitute the subtle body. The Antaratman mentioned in the mantra is to be understood to refer to the subtle body and not to the seat of consciousness. In short, the labor of Mother Shruti is to hammer into our understanding the idea that all the names and forms recognized by our senses, all the mental emotions and intellectual capacities, in short, the entire world outside and within ourselves, have arisen from the one eternal principle, the Atman. Mantra number 10. Purushaye vedam vishvam karma tapo brahma paramrutam etadyo veda nihitam guhayam sovidya granthe vikirati hasomya. 10. The Purusha alone is all this universe, the sacrificial works, karma, and austerities, tapas, a good looking youth. O good looking youth, he who knows this highest and immortal Brahman as seated in the cavity of the heart unites the knot of unties the knot of ignorance even here in this very life. Summarizing these mantras mentioned above, Shruti is here declaring the spiritual conclusion that the entire world of names and forms, feelings and ideas is but a manifestation of the dynamic whole, the Purusha. Action and thought, knowledge, when combined together, provide us with the different fields of activities called universe. To know that this Purusha is the knot of ignorance is the primal bondage under which the spirit seemingly commandeers a delusion to dream its own finitude and mortality. Hence, the Shruti says here that one who recognizes himself to be nothing but the Purusha and thereby fixes his entire identification with it ends all his thraldom of ignorance and comes to live the godhood which is his birthright. With this heartening message of hope, freedom, and liberation, the scripture closes its first part. End of chapter 2nd, section 1. Hari Om. We continue in the next video. Om Shri Chinmaya Sadgurave Namaha. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.